if you look at some of the tweets and the back and forths, Taylor's basically been talking about this meme coin and the idea of crypto trying to get her on board and pump this thing. The idea of her coming out and saying, it just feels like y'all want me to push this right now to pump and dump the coin. This being public discussion, I find fascinating. Welcome in, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope you're having a nice start to your week as we are here at Coinage recapping the biggest headlines in crypto as we normally do every week for you live here at our headquarters in Brooklyn. I'm the host of Coinage, Zack, coming to you live today to discuss everything that's been going on, as well as a recap from the Avalanche Summit. Just got back from Buenos Aires. Hola a todos. My Spanish is rusty, but not too rusty, as we will get into later on in the show. And of course, want to give a shout out to all of our NFT holders out there who make the show possible, as well as those currently staking with us. Of course, if you're not aware, you can stake with us, the only community-owned Web3 outlet in the space. Coinage X Stake. We got over $200 million stake with us right now. You can learn more at coinage.media to stake with us. Become a member today. Roll with the co-founder of Netflix and all the other smart people in crypto, along with yours truly. Want to kick things off with discussing the funds and what we're seeing in Bitcoin right now. Taking a look at that chart from CoinShares, the report showing that we did see a pretty healthy rebound in inflows last week. The chart looks good, folks. It's the largest amount we've seen flow into crypto asset investment products since July. In total, more than $2 billion, $2.2 billion to be exact, which is pretty good. And of course, this is a backward-looking chart because we're all constantly looking at what's going to happen this week. But in general, strong indicators across the board as we look at price movement as well. Right now, sitting north of about 67,000. We were approaching 70,000 and got a little bit of pushback as you crossed over the 69,000 mark, which again, right now, there's a few different things to consider. We're going to talk about the election odds in just a second, but really though, there are plenty of other bullish takes out there indicating that it's not just all about the price chart we're looking at, but it's also about really where flows are coming from. And I think that this is kind of a key differentiator versus what we saw at the beginning of the year when we were kind of sitting close to the momentum rally zone of hitting those all-time highs around 74K. What you got now, looking at the headline over here from Bernstein and their analyst, looking at the price calls here, is that it's retail sentiment coming back, which would be new. And it's also the idea of funds themselves versus mostly kind of this arbitrage carry trade that was existing. If you think back to earlier in the year, so many people were talking about the Japan yen carry trade, where you basically borrow short, lend long, and with arbitrage opportunities in Bitcoin. Basically, back then, a lot of people were expecting and seeing that the support there was mostly hedge funds that could evaporate, things can flip, et cetera, et cetera. But what you're seeing now, in terms of what at least according to Bernstein analysts are saying, is that it's actually not just that. In fact, they're saying that the incremental flows have more to do with actual buyers of these ETFs, which obviously, when you back up and consider how quickly we've crossed where gold was not too long ago, it's pretty true. Just considering everything. We'll look at this one quote here, Texas. We believe the incremental ETF inflows are now increasingly leading to Bitcoin spot demand, given asset managers are focused on distribution to wealth advisors and wirehouses, unlike initial ETF demand, which came from the spot CME derivatives carry trade, mostly from hedge funds and ARB funds. And so that's kind of exciting to see for more reasons than just the idea of wealth advisors pushing to clients, but it's also enough to bring back that retail sentiment as we schedule. You want a wide base when it comes to the upward movements in October. You don't want just kind of either one or the other. Retail really can't sustain some of these moves. Institutional demand by itself, I don't think can necessarily be trusted, though we haven't necessarily seen any wide, massive selling when price moves downwards. So in general, I'm just saying that the base looks good. That move upwards, even though we didn't kind of crack through to new all-time highs, in general, the risk-reward looking quite good here. And as I said, the numbers, I still think there's not really anything from these charts to show for this, but I will just shout it out. More than $20 billion in total net inflows just 10 months after we got the Bitcoin ETFs all going live. A lot of people have been pointing out that that took gold ETFs. I know gold's on a run right now, but it took gold ETFs 5 years to crack that $20 billion number for net inflows, total inflows, as ETFs. So when you consider that 10 months versus 5 years, it's kind of a narrative we've been pushing this whole year, but it is pretty insane not to be overlooked just how quickly these ETFs have been able to attract funds. And as we said, this was always going to be a step-by-step thing. It was only a couple months ago, by the way, that we were shouting out Morgan Stanley being the first of the big so-called wirehouses to give their wealth advisors the green light to sell just 2 Bitcoin ETFs. And so all of this stuff takes time. And again, the risk reward when you consider all of those pieces, whether or not Trump wins, by the way, which we'll get into in a second, whether or not that happens, things are looking good just from a broad base. So we're going to go ahead and show this headline one more time because I would echo the same thing. I don't work at Bernstein, but if you're listening to me, and again, this is not financial advice, but in general, right now, I would say we are seeing a lot of indicators scream risk on as well. So that is where we start our show today, and we'll see if the movement back, the retrace to 67 after getting close to 70K, whether or not that continues or if we resume our up only. Now, shifting over to politics, that is potentially part of the reason why we are seeing the up only, whether it's CoinShares or whether I think it's Bernstein too. There are a lot of analysts right now saying that this upward movement is because of Trump's increasing political odds for the presidential election. And now look, let's just go ahead and call a spade here, because it is true that on the margin, Trump's odds are improving. Now, the next question is there manipulation afoot? And that was kind of the discussion across the board when it comes to crypto Twitter. Kind of interesting when you consider all of these things, because what does the word manipulation really even mean? If you ask Newsweek, it means a few different things. And I think the Newsweek article actually might be one of the better ones when it comes into what's really going on. I do want to show Polymarket prediction odds, because that's basically what all of this comes down to, is where Polymarket has Trump's odds, which, again, you can go off the polls, you can go off of Polymarket. The main difference here and the main reason why this is getting so much attention is because, of course, these are crypto native folks looking at the election forecasts and looking at Trump's odds, and Trump's odds on Polymarket right now are far higher than the polls. Now, the reason as to why manipulation is being thrown around is because digging into why we're seeing such high Polymarket odds for Trump right now has more to do with this story, which I think was actually covered pretty well by DL News. Shout out to Liam Kelly for his story. Similar to what the Wall Street Journal did, digging into which these 4 accounts were that had been throwing a bunch of money into Trump's election odds, about $25 million in this market, which is pretty deep, came in from just 4 accounts that, again, collectively spent about $25 million on this market, which definitely did swing things. Now, when you get into the idea of whether or not that's market manipulation, well, if you want to do that, you could go to the Daily Beast, and their headline is much more in the vein of, hey, this is market manipulation here. They're cheating. They're trying to show that Trump's odds are booming right now, and he's pulling away. And that's why this is manipulation, because they're trying to basically get ahead of the narrative and show everybody that that's what's going on. Now, to be fair, this is an open market, so anyone can put their money into this. The reason why I think it's so interesting is that we saw such a huge legal battle in the states, kind of trying to go back and forth. Elizabeth Warren also leading the charge to say that Americans should not be able to gamble on political outcomes because that's un-American. It went back and forth. We saw rulings in the courts basically saying, nah, you can kind of do what you want here. And so the reason why I think this is so interesting is that we had those legal rulings in that legal battle, and now claims again from the left mostly that this is market manipulation because 4 accounts have thrown so much money into it. Now, the big question is, why would they want to throw so much money into it? I suppose if we want to take a legal argument to this and want to make it criminal, as we discussed with the SBF trial coverage that we had for you earlier in the year, a lot of times it comes down to intent. Now, the question is, are these 4 accounts mostly doing this because they want to boost Trump's odds and control the narrative that he is now pulling away 2 weeks ahead of the election? Could be. Not going to rule that out. But if you look at, I think what Nick Carter's been saying on Twitter here is that the marginal moves have been in Trump's favor. So, it's not crazy to expect that someone might be wanting to front run what could be a potential inevitability, which is that Trump is pulling away. And if that's the case, then why wouldn't you want to throw some serious cash in on it? Or the other side is that people could just be hedging. So, like, I don't think there's certainly not enough evidence here to go ahead and say that Trump really, or that these accounts are really behind a scheme so-called to pump Trump's election odds on Polymarket to show that he's pulling away here. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out, but I don't see enough evidence of that. But I think it's funny the way that everyone has covered this kind of the way that they want to. Also funny to point out that at the bottom of the Newsweek article, I don't know, I've never seen this before. Obviously here at Trustless Media, our whole idea of trying to be as unbiased as possible is just let anyone buy an NFT and co-own this thing with us. So you can weigh in on what we want to do and what we want to cover. But I think it is interesting to look at the bottom of the Newsweek article because I didn't know they did this. They actually let you say, hey, how fair are we on this thing? And obviously a lot of people saying that this is an extremely unfair article by saying that like Trump is trying to manipulate election results just by the Polymarket stuff. Again, I think it's a very hard claim to show unless you really know and you dig into exactly what the intent was. I don't think you're going to get an answer, but just kind of funny to look at the unfair left-leaning rater on this article as they claim manipulation is afoot. Alas, speaking of manipulation, maybe we should talk about meme coins. That's a good segue, as good as any, I think, as we dive into what has been the big discussion topic in crypto as Murad continues to hammer home the point made at Token in Singapore that meme coins are where the party's going to be at over the next couple weeks, months to come. And we chatted with the Doodle CEO. Julian joined the show. If you haven't checked out that interview, just want to play a clip of what he had to say about meme coins versus NFTs. Of course, we may be biased on that front, no matter who you ask in the coinage community, seeing as that's the way that we're set up. Whether or not meme coins or NFTs are better at capturing value for the community that is supporting them. We're going to get into a discussion in a little bit, but just want to play what Julian told us as maybe some pushback against the meme coin thesis that has taken over crypto Twitter. Take a listen to what he told us.
I think NFT communities are frankly a little bit stronger. However, I actually believe in the use case of meme coins. I think all assets that represent culture around a brand is interesting, right? I caution the space that what happened in NFTs is absolutely going to happen in meme coins. It's just going to happen faster. There's going to be some incredible communities and incredible brands that are probably built from meme coins, but 99% of them are not going to turn into anything. I get the notion, but I think at the end of the day, the core thing that people want is that intrinsic motivator to actually stick around for something. I'm not building for the person that is coming in, boom, you're in one day, you're out the next week, you're out the next month. We're building for the people that want to be here forever, that are going to go through ups and downs for us. Because if we were building for anybody else, it just doesn't motivate us internally.
So aligning all of these interests, I think, is an important piece to the idea of why NFT communities might be stronger than meme coins. And obviously, again, there's always a question around transparency of who's really running these things and who owns what in the inevitable rug pulls that we've seen in a lot of these projects in the past. And I think there are a few we can discuss. And obviously right now, talk of the town, I suppose, in terms of where the collective attention is at. I would say Goat is one that caught my eye. Texas, you probably don't know about this one. We hadn't chatted about it yet, but I think it's quite interesting just to consider kind of the AI coins that are now popping up. In this one, backed by a bet from, I believe, Mark Andreessen, basically saying that, you could potentially have AI agents working on these things, coming out, trying to play around with very different things, and this one called Goat. It's been interesting to watch all of this play out when you have large language models potentially, working on, hey, how do we pump a coin, and AI agents. I mean, these worlds we always talked about would be converging, but I think there's a different type of token to pay attention to as well. I might be more interested in the human side of these rather than the AI pieces, but we're going to cover those all as they pop up per usual. But just on the topic of aligned interests, I do think we are seeing another interesting one. And surprise, surprise, all roads lead back to Ansem, one of the largest crypto influencers when it comes to meme coins. Just want to show this one here because out of all the meme coins, we've obviously seen a few touted by Murad. Of course, as I mentioned, GOAT token on his list, essentially showing what he's taking an eye at here. And one of them that caught my eye was Taylor, which is an interesting one we're going to talk about now because that one is not run by any AI agent. In fact, named after a betting influencer who's working with DraftKings. And, we don't talk about meme coins a lot on this show. But interesting that it's on his list. Interesting if you track kind of like what's been going on there. If you don't know who Taylor is, perhaps we should show you because she, in her own right, is a bit of a Twitter celebrity as well. I think we have a video of hers that she posted to Twitter to show here. She's a betting influencer. She works with DraftKings. Here she is in Aruba. She talks about sports bets, and a lot of her followers are dudes who like gambling on sports. Important context, I suppose, for what we are about to discuss. Because the back and forths, very interesting. I'm not entirely sure the details. I reached out to both Ansem and Taylor for details around this. Because where do these meme coins come from? How does this work? Usually, at least is what we've seen in this cycle. You got a lot of people who are native in crypto or in meme coins. They find an influencer. Maybe they reach out. Maybe they strike a deal. Maybe they have some sort of agreement. If you look at some of the tweets and the back and forths, Taylor's basically been talking about this meme coin and the idea of crypto trying to get her on board and pump this thing. Basically saying, I think it's interesting. I mean, we've seen a lot of these cases come out before in how the SEC and other regulators look at these things. These conversations being on public media may come up again. Let's just say that. The idea of her coming out and saying, it just feels like y'all want me to push this right now to pump and dump the coin. This being public discussion, I find fascinating. And then also kind of these other ways that she's been talking about it. Y'all, my stock is rising. And perhaps maybe we should even show the chart. Again, I don't own any of this right now. I say right now because I think it's pretty interesting. It's a question for the chat. Question for the chat when we think about the market cap of this meme coin being 3.4 million right now. Again, no details really on what the hell to expect from a meme coin like this. But this is where Texas, and this is where I appeal to our viewers personally. This is where potentially, dare I say, what if we applied a rational way to think about this meme coin in particular versus what we've seen in the past. Now, one of those that we've seen in the past is also on Ansem's list, and one that he has no doubt been highly attached to, which is Iggy Azalea's meme coin mother. Huge in the Solana space. If you're running the same playbook, I think that one, what is it, market cap 63 million? No doubt, Iggy Azalea, perhaps a much larger person in terms of followers than the respective Taylor Mathis we're discussing about today as a DraftKings sports gambling analyst and partner. But let's also dig in the fact that Taylor Mathis has a bunch of gambling degens who follow her. And if you're a sports gambler, you're probably much more in tune with the space in crypto than you are if you're Iggy Azalea's fans. No disrespect to them, of course. We're all Iggy Azalea fans at the end of the day. But listen, am I going to sit here and try and rationally put together you've got two attractive women who are now working with one of the biggest crypto influencers and now potentially pumping this coin in a way that Taylor completely seems content to talk about on her own tweets? Again, I have no understanding and no idea of how these things ever happen. But if you're sitting there and saying, hey, where's a meme coin that still has some room to run? I don't know. I don't know if there's a way to actually calculate these things. And if it were me, I don't get in these games because I don't trust anyone steering the ship. But who am I to say that this could be bad when you've got, higher conversion expectation rate, shall we say, of gamblers who are already degens in the space following this person and could potentially also ape into the coin. I would say there's probably a much higher understanding of how to even use a Phantom wallet than perhaps your average kind of Iggy Azalea follower. But again, these overlaps small data to pull from, Texas. We'll leave it at that. But again, I think a lot of these narratives, as cool as the AI agents and the one that's like, okay, what happens if an AI is actually running a meme coin? Fascinating to look at and cool to see the way that GOAT popped and how quickly that came up and down. Kind of retraced a bit. But still, I think even more fascinating than all that is just kind of the human component of how many followers can you get to buy this thing? Is that even good? As Doodle's CEO said, probably not. Doesn't really create anything beyond a zero-sum game of influencers and perhaps even the celebrities, if you want to call Taylor that, in this misaligned interest, and we'll see what happens with it. Hopefully, doesn't end as poorly as a lot of the other meme coins have. And if you're all making money, who am I to say that our model's any better? I don't know, but I think that it does, at least when you back up and think about co-ownership, operating something. To Julian's point, to what we've seen from Doodles, the real value, I think, is better aligned when you actually do either A, have some sort of co-ownership structure that makes sense and the value can be accrued to a centralized entity, as Coinage is a DAO co-op, or you have people who actually believe in the project and actually believe in what the thing is doing. Credit to Iggy Azalea and what she's trying to do with her own token. I guess she's adding utility where she can. With this one, too early to tell. Just wanted to put it on your radar. Why? I don't know. What was the footage that we showed? I don't remember what we had for this project. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely sure. But it's a project that I think a lot of people are taking a look at. And we'll see if anything comes from it. I want to move on to another project that a lot of people are taking a look at. Perhaps for different reasons. Perhaps for reasons I can speak to more directly. Which is, of course, Avalanche just wrapped up their summit down in Buenos Aires. Beautiful, beautiful Buenos Aires. Always a good time down there. Of course, we have some footage to show from that conference as well. And I just want to highlight, it was very, very exciting to see all of this play out, as we talked about on last week's show. Off the grid, absolutely blowing up right now. So this was kind of the setup down there in Buenos Aires. I was learning a ton, saw a bunch of cool kind of use cases in person, including a crypto debit card that you can spend anywhere, which I think is going to be cool. We'll highlight kind of what we learned from BlockPay later on this week. The food was phenomenal, as always, at Avalanche events. Shout out to the Troy Pond there. But the big thing, as I said, off the grid, there was this huge gaming station where anyone could play it. Really cool to see that in person in terms of how everyone got to interact with it. And as we heard from the team, it is not just kind of one of those flash in a pan bets. Again, very distinct from kind of the strategy that other blockchains took. This is a bet on gaming. And Luigi gave the updates in terms of how many wallets now have been onboarded through that game, up to over 7.5 million. In less than 2 weeks, just through that game alone, which is pretty fascinating to see. And when you look at everything else that's cooking down there, basically what I learned from the summit and what I took away was, again, if you want to ride with chains that are trying to do real onboarding and real, I guess, funding of projects that are trying to do things the right way, look no further than what the Avalanche team has done there. It was fascinating to kind of see not only that, but also I think one of the other components that was also, that Luigi also flagged, is stablecoin adoption on Avalanche being up so high. That's constantly one of those indicators that I think a lot of the analysts that we've had on the show look at in terms of total value locked, but also just significant movements when it comes to the way that people want to use and spend money on chain. So my major takeaways were that there are still huge bets. Of course, full disclosure, Avalabs, an investor in Trustless, our production company here. So we'll throw that out there. But in general, if you look at the chart, it's just one of those cryptos that has not advanced the way that we have seen others advance. And you could say, hey, maybe that's a reason for why I wouldn't want to get into this project. Or you could, on the flip side, say it's a reason because they've made different kinds of bets that are looked at differently, and now they're starting to pay off, which, if you think about this cycle continuing, as we discussed last week, something to take another look at. And no doubt, we're overdue to have John and Goon on the show, chatting with them. We'll have them on so they can give you the spiel directly rather than it coming from me secondhand. But cool to see it all play out on the ground. As far as anything else goes, Texas, I think that's pretty much what we had slated for this show. And I think in general, it's good to be back in the States, stateside, to cover all of this as we are now just a few weeks away from the election. Things are going to be constantly changing. Keep it locked to Coinage and Coinage.media, where you can catch all the biggest headlines in crypto and Web3. Going to be covering this all for you. Have Travis Kling coming back on the show for his insights on how this might all shake out, and a lot more coming up this week for you. For everybody here at Coinage, for all my new friends that I made down in Argentina, I would like to say thank you for tuning back in and chatting with us again. I'm Zack signing off. We'll see you again soon.